I have found that people lie, most often deceiving themselves. Not so the dead. The dead are so very, very loud, and yet lying is not in their nature. It is so humbling to listen to the dead speak. That's a quote from Saburo Arasaka. I thought it was quite appropriate to quote that when we are about to do a video that explores Hanako Arasaka, because everything changed in Hanako's life the moment her brother killed her father. Hanako Arasaka is the third child and only daughter to Saburo. She is a skilled netrunner and the head of the Kiji faction of the Arasaka Corporation. She is loved by many people and often described as sweet and beautiful in the eyes of many Arasaka employees. She is an intelligent woman who did not agree with her father's ambitions and had her own agenda she planned to follow. Despite knowing what her father's wishes entailed with her, she still loved and didn't want to displease him. Her relationship with her brother Yorinobu is one of great importance to her. Through her strong and calm demeanor, Hanako is able to command and lead with great pride for her work. She became the figurehead and the CEO of the corporation. Although her digital projects were what drove her, Hanako was the only one who understood Alt's work with the Soul Killer. 1999 to 2020. Hanako is Saburo Arasaka's youngest child, conceived when he was 80 years old, and the apple of his eye. She was born to Saburo's third and last wife, Michiko, who died shortly thereafter due to complications caused by the birth on March 2, 1999. Saburo was charmed by his little daughter's stunning beauty, and he decided to raise her in the sheltered confines of the Arasaka family compound in order to protect her from the scarring traumas of life in the exterior world. She received her schooling at the compound through trusted tutors, and although she is now a grown woman, Hanako still only leaves the compound about once a month, and even then under heavy escort. Cut off from the outside world, she learned how to travel and explore the net instead. Saburo made sure that Hanako was never made aware of the darker side of the corporation, but through her net explorations, Hanako was just beginning to suspect the horrible truth. While Hanako would not leave the compound, the few times she would leave to see Tokyo, she was escorted by Shintaro Takayama, the chief of security of the compound, or Katsuo Iwashima, the second in command. Shintaro was like a second father to her, and she trusted him more than most. She was also delighted with his stories of ancient Japan, and he would tell her whilst she was growing up. Katsuo would escort her when Shintaro was not available, and her relationship with him was also a pleasant one. She was a sweet, intelligent woman, but she had been chafing under her father's well-meaning restraint for several years, but she had never actually voiced her complaints. She knew that her father wanted to arrange her marriage in order to solidify a corporate alliance, but she secretly dreaded the day that would happen. She never wished to hurt her father, but Hanako had sworn to live an independent life after he died. Hanako's relationship with her older half-brother Kei was strained. While Kei adored Hanako and would do anything for her, she found him cold and threatening and never fully trusted him. Her closest family member was Yorinobu, older rebellious brother of the same mother. Hanako and Yorinobu would regularly meet in the net while he rode with the Steel Dragons. 2022 to 2023. Hanako was not directly involved in the Fourth Corporate War, however she was kept under strict protection within the family compound. During these years, she spent most of her time in Osaka. After the war ended, despite her feelings towards him, she still attended the funeral of her eldest brother Kei, who actually died during the war. Hanako and her father Saburo were surprised when Yorinobu showed up to the funeral asking for forgiveness. With her help, Yorinobu was able to return to the family. 2045. So in the 2040s, as the eldest daughter of the Arasaka family, Hanako had always been a bit of a recluse. As a highly skilled netrunner, she had always preferred to work on her digital projects, particularly on a revised version of Soul Killer that would allow the transfer of minds into cloned bodies. She was one of few who grasped the true meaning of Alt Cunningham's work. However, with the death of Kei, the remainder of the old guard had unified around her and wanted to continue Saburo and Kei's plans as the Kiji faction. They represented the faction that had hoped for a peaceful reconciliation with the NUSA, with Hanako as their figurehead. She was also instrumental in getting her brother Yorinobu to finally reconcile with the fractured Arasaka family. At some point before 2070, Hanako began to run a preserve for the last surviving Japanese green pheasants on the island of Shikoku. In 2077, Hanako left Japan on the aircraft carrier Kujira with her bodyguard Oda, accompanying her father Suburo on his trip to Night City, where he wanted to confront her brother Yorinobu for stealing the relic from his lab. Concerned for her brother, she offered to speak to him herself, or at least accompany Suburo, who declined both requests. On her question what he planned to do, Suburo could not give her a good answer. However, he let himself be discouraged from annihilating Night City to avoid the talk. After Suburo's death, Hanako planned to give a eulogy for her father during the Dashi float parade in Japantown during the local Aratama Matsuri festival. During the festival, she was confronted by her father's former bodyguard Goro Takamura, who wanted to talk to her. When she refused, he had abducted her and took her to an abandoned apartment building in Vista del Rey, where he attempted to reason with her. Hanako refused this along with the offered tea. Only the merc V, Takamura's ally and eyewitness to Suburo's murder, was able to tell Hanako the truth, that her father had been killed by her brother Yorinobu. However, at that point of the conversation, Arasaka soldiers, led by Adam Smasher, burst into the building, securing Hanako and destroying the floor in the process. The next is dependent on choice. With V's help, Takamura can escape from the attack and will be placed in a secure location by Hanako. Regardless of Takamura's fate, Hanako sent a proxy to speak with V, who at that point was hiding in the Sunset Motel. Now convinced, she offered to work together. Claiming that her hands were tied, she tasked them with acquiring a copy of Soul Killer and then contact her on her private line. During that call, she called a meeting at the luxury restaurant Embers. And when V arrives there, Hanako explains the situation, that no one truly believed the story of Suburo's poisoning, yet no one, herself included, was willing to stand against Yorinobu. Hanako offered to save V's life in return for their statement in front of Arasaka's board of directors. The conversation ended somewhat abruptly when she called back to Yorinobu's estate in Haywood. So the final part is depending on your choices of the ending. So if V asks Panam for help, Yorinobu Arasaka confirms that Hanako was among the victims from when Alt took control of Arasaka Tower, vowing to find those responsible for her death. If V lets Johnny and Rogue go in, Hanako disappears from the public. News reports included a statement from Hanako that she was grieving for her father and needed time away from the spotlight. The fate of the Arasaka family and the company was unclear, as Yorinobu returned to the Tokyo headquarters. If V asks Hanako for help, or I think agrees to Hanako's offer, she informs V that she would meet with Goro and Anders Hellman to rescue her from the Arasaka estate. During the rescue, she informed the group of the security forces, and once they were successful, they took off in an AV for Arasaka Tower. Hanako spoke with V as she took them through Suburo's office to then later meet with Suburo Arasaka as an engram. The three had a brief discussion before Suburo told Hanako he was ready. Afterwards, she went to meet with the members of the board and faction leaders so that her father would confront them and they could learn the truth of Yorinobu's betrayal. During the meeting, Yorinobu began a military coup of the corporation, killing all members of the board except Hanako and Michiko Arasaka. Hanako, along with Goro Takamura and V, stormed the upper echelons of Arasaka Tower to dethrone Yorinobu Arasaka's tyrannical reign. Hanako confronted her brother and had his consciousness overwritten with Suburo's, who then lived on to revert all changes by his son while he was acting CEO. So what we've got here is the cyberware that she has a neural processor, interface plugs, a chip socket, Cyber Eye with Times Square marquee armaments, and as head of Hitachi Shipping, she has actually access to a great deal of resources. She prefers to dress rich but not too much. Hanako has also kept a rolled deck from her days as a hacker. And that's all we've got on Hanako Arasaka in terms of lore. It's kind of an interesting story, and I think it's one that could do with, I've said it many times on Cyberpunk, maybe some post-game extra story content DLC, kind of like The Witcher 3, and I think that it would be great to know what happens next for Hanako. Obviously it depends on the ending you chose, but essentially in all but one of the endings she survives somehow, so it would be really good to know where it goes from there, because it seems like Arasaka sort of started to explode. However, in one of the endings, obviously Suburo takes over Yorinobu's body. So that would be very interesting. But what do you think about Hanako and Arasaka in general and everything else? I look forward to seeing you in the next lore video on this channel.
Excellent. You have come.
Fucking busboys here must make a killing in tips.
Thanks for meeting me.
Of course, V. And I thank you. Before we discuss details, I feel I owe you an explanation. I must tell you why I changed my mind and wish to help.
Weren't sure of anything. If you could trust me, if Yorinobu killed your father. Now...
I knew. From the start.
You... knew?
All the board members knew. Not one soul even slightly interested in the matter believed in the poisoning. Details were disparate, inconsistent.
You knew, but didn't do a thing about it. Why? Suddenly sprout a conscience just yesterday?
My father had flaws. I know this. I harbor no illusions about it. When a foe needed removal, my father ordered it without a thought to mercy. A way of being Yorinobu could not abide. But to my father, ends ever justified means. Saburo Arasaka has always valued just one thing. Do you know what it is?
Ties that bind.
Yes, family.